That morning, my dad slapped me so hard the imprint stayed on my cheek for 3 hours. I stood there in silence. My brother David watched from across the room, his eyes drifting toward the window as if what just happened was perfectly ordinary, as if daughters get struck for asking questions every day in the Chandler household. By dinner, I cooked a grand feast. Beef Wellington with a truffle crust, roasted potatoes glistening with herb butter, a 2015 Bordeaux that cost more than my first month's rent after college. My brother smiled at my father and said, "Finally, she understands her place." My father nodded, satisfied. He believed I had surrendered, until they saw who was sitting at the head of the table. I am Sarah Chandler, 34 years old, a structural engineer. And this is the story of how I conducted a controlled demolition, not of a building, but of the foundation of lies my family had built for 12 years. If you're watching this, please subscribe and let me know where you are watching from. Let me take you back to where it started, or rather, where I finally stopped pretending it hadn't been happening all along. 3 weeks before that slap, I woke up at 5:30 a.m. in my Boston apartment, the same way I had for the past decade. Coffee brewing, laptop open. The Harborview Tower project files spread across my kitchen table, $47 million in structural engineering work, and I was the lead. That morning, I received the promotion I'd spent 6 years earning, Senior Structural Engineer. The title came with a corner office, a 15% raise, and the kind of professional respect I'd clawed my way toward since graduating from MIT. I called my father to share the news. "Good," he said. There was no warmth in his voice, no pride, just that single word, flat as concrete. "But you need to come to Cape Cod next weekend. Family matter, don't be late." He hung up before I could respond. I remember staring at my phone, trying to remember the last time he'd asked me anything about my work, my projects, my life. When David got promoted at his commercial real estate firm 2 years ago, our father bought him a 3-bedroom condo in Back Bay. When I made senior engineer on a project worth 10 times David's annual sales, I got good and a command to appear. That was the first sign I should have recognized. In the Chandler family, a daughter's achievements weren't celebrated. They were noted, briefly, before being filed away as irrelevant. The second sign came every Thanksgiving, every Christmas, every family gathering for the past 15 years. While David sat in the living room drinking whiskey with our father, discussing business, I was in the kitchen, cooking, cleaning, serving, the invisible daughter doing invisible work. I packed my overnight bag that Friday evening, telling myself this time would be different. In my desk drawer sat an unopened envelope from Thornton and Associates, postmarked 2012. I'd assumed it was old tax paperwork from my mother's estate. I didn't give it a second thought. That envelope would change everything. The drive from Boston to Cape Cod took 2 hours and 14 minutes. I know because I counted every one of them, my knuckles white against the steering wheel, a familiar knot tightening in my stomach. At the office that morning, everything had been different. My colleagues respected me. My project manager trusted me with 7-figure decisions. When I spoke in meetings, people listened, not because they had to, but because I had earned their attention through 10 years of flawless calculations and structures that didn't fall down. But the closer I got to my family's house, the smaller I felt. By the time I crossed the Sagamore Bridge, I was already rehearsing how to make myself agreeable, how to smile through whatever criticism came my way, how to shrink. My phone buzzed. "David. Where are you?" 40 minutes out. "Hurry up. Dad's waiting. And don't make this difficult, Sarah. Whatever he needs, just cooperate for once." For once. As if I'd ever done anything but cooperate. As if my entire relationship with this family hadn't been built on swallowing my own voice to keep the peace. "What does he need?" I asked. "You'll find out when you get here." Click. I turned on the radio to fill the silence. A news report caught my attention. Something about SEC investigations into Boston area venture capital firms. Alleged insider trading, market manipulation. I listened with half an ear, not connecting the dots. Not yet. When I pulled into the gravel driveway of the Cape Cod house, I noticed an unfamiliar car parked near the entrance. A black Mercedes sedan, sleek and expensive. The vanity plate read, MRDN Cap. I didn't know what those letters meant. I would learn soon enough. The house smelled like old money and older secrets. Oak paneling, leather furniture. My mother's antique clock still ticking on the mantel, though she'd been gone for 5 years now. I found my father in his study, seated behind the mahogany desk that had belonged to 3 generations of Chandler men. Across from him sat a stranger, a thin man in a charcoal suit, fingers steepled, briefcase open at his feet. When I entered, they both looked up with the expression of people interrupted mid-conspiracy. "Sit down," my father said. "No hello, no how was the drive." "Wait." The stranger stood, gathered his papers, and shook my father's hand. "I'll have the documents finalized by Monday, Gavin. We just need the signature." After he left, I finally got a look at my father. Gavin Chandler, 62 years old, former partner at one of Boston's most prestigious venture capital firms. His study walls were covered with the proof of his success: framed awards from investment associations, photographs with senators and CEOs, his Harvard Business School diploma positioned at eye level for anyone who entered. But something was different. His jaw was tight. His eyes carried a sharpness I'd seen before. Only in the worst times, when deals fell through or markets turned. David stood in the corner, tumbler of whiskey in hand, watching me with an expression I couldn't read. Warning? Contempt? Both? "Who was that man?" I asked. "Raymond Wells, financial broker." My father slid a stack of papers across the desk. "This is what I need from you." I picked up the documents. Second mortgage application. Property: Chandler Family Trust, Cape Cod residence. Principal amount: $1,200,000. Interest rate: 9.8%. Term: 5 years. And at the bottom, a signature line labeled, "Trustee authorization required." "Sign it," my father said. "Tonight." "I don't understand. If you own the house, why do you need my signature?" His face reddened. "Don't ask questions, Sarah. Just sign." I read the document again, slower this time. My engineer's eye caught details that didn't belong. The form required authorization from the trustee of the Chandler Family Trust. In the space where a name should have been typed, someone had crossed out Eleanor M. Chandler with black ink and handwritten Sarah E. Chandler above it. My mother's name, replaced with mine. "Dad, this says I'm the trustee." I looked up. "That can't be right. You've owned this house since Mom died." "The lawyers made a mistake years ago. We're correcting it now." His voice was too controlled, too rehearsed. "All you need to do is sign, and the correction goes through automatically." That wasn't how trusts worked. I didn't need a law degree to know that. "What's the money for?" I asked. David stepped forward. "Sarah, don't make this harder than it needs to be. Dad's under a lot of pressure right now. The details aren't your concern." "$1.2 million isn't a detail, David. It's a second mortgage on a property worth—" I glanced at the appraisal attached. $2.8 million. If something goes wrong, we lose the house." My father stood. "Nothing will go wrong." "Then explain it to me. If this is legitimate, why the rush? Why the secrecy?" "Because you're my daughter, and I'm telling you to sign." His palm slammed against the desk. "I don't need to explain myself to you. You've never contributed anything to this family except your presence at holiday dinners. The least you can do is not obstruct the people who actually matter." The words hung in the air like smoke. I set the papers down. "I need time to review this properly. I'll give you my answer tomorrow." My father's face went from red to purple. "You're refusing me?" March 14th, 8:47 a.m. I'll remember that timestamp for the rest of my life. I came downstairs after a sleepless night, determined to have a calm, rational conversation. I'd prepared questions. I'd practiced keeping my voice level. I thought if I could just explain my concerns clearly enough, my father would understand. They were waiting for me in the living room, my father in his armchair, David standing behind him like a soldier awaiting orders. I reviewed the documents, I began. I have questions about the terms, the interest rate, and specifically why this requires a trustee signature when— Enough! My father rose. I've had enough of your interrogation. You are my daughter. You don't have the right to question me in my own house. Dad, I'm not trying to— The slap came without warning. His open palm connected with my left cheek, with the force of 62 years of entitlement behind it. The crack echoed off the walls. I stumbled backward, catching myself on the armrest of the sofa, my vision blurring from the shock more than the pain. For a moment, no one moved. I looked at David, my brother, the person who had taught me to ride a bike when I was 7, who had held my hand at our mother's funeral. He turned his gaze toward the window. If you weren't so stubborn, he said quietly, none of this would have happened. You always have to make things difficult. Mom's gone, Sarah. Dad doesn't have anyone else to rely on, and you're too selfish to see it. My father straightened his collar. Sign the papers, or don't bother coming back to this house again. I didn't cry, not because I wasn't devastated. I was, but because something inside me had shifted, cracked, then reformed into something harder. I touched my cheek, already swelling. I need to think, I said quietly. I'll be upstairs. Neither of them tried to stop me. In my childhood bedroom, I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the wall. The wallpaper was the same as when I was 12 years old. Pink roses, faded, peeling at the corners. Then I remembered the envelope. Thornton and Associates, 2012. Still sitting in my desk drawer back in Boston. No, wait. I'd brought it with me, in my overnight bag, intending to finally sort through Mom's old paperwork. I reached for my bag with trembling hands. The envelope was heavier than I remembered. I slid it open with my thumbnail, hands still shaking from adrenaline and betrayal. Inside were 3 documents: a cover letter, a legal filing, and a death certificate I didn't recognize. The cover letter was addressed to me, from Margaret Thornton, attorney at law. Dear Ms. Chandler, enclosed, please find the executed trust documents as instructed by your mother, Eleanor M. Chandler, prior to her passing. Per her wishes, you are named as sole trustee of the Chandler Family Irrevocable Trust, which holds title to the Cape Cod residence located at 47 Ocean View Drive. Your mother was explicit. No modifications to the trust may be made without your authorization. No sale, mortgage, or transfer of the property may occur without your signature. Please contact our office if you have any questions. I read it 3 times. Then I picked up the trust document itself. Page 7, Section 4A. Trustee Designation. The grantor hereby names Sarah Elizabeth Chandler as sole trustee of this irrevocable trust, effective upon the grantor's death. No other party, including Gavin Richard Chandler, shall have authority to modify, encumber, or liquidate trust assets without the trustee's written consent. My mother had done this 7 years before she died, while she was still healthy, while my father was still charming at dinner parties and successful in boardrooms and no one knew what was coming. She had known. I grabbed my phone and searched for Thornton and Associates. A woman answered on the second ring. This is Sarah Chandler. I need to speak with Margaret Thornton about my mother's trust. 20 minutes later, I had confirmation. The trust was valid, active, legally binding. Your father came to our office 6 months ago, Maggie Thornton told me, her voice grave. He tried to have the trust modified. I refused. Only the trustee has that authority. Why didn't you tell me? Client confidentiality. Your mother's instructions were to maintain discretion unless you initiated contact. Sarah? She paused. Your mother knew exactly who her husband was. She protected you the only way she could. I hung up and stared at the documents in my lap. 12 years. 12 years of believing I had no power. My mother's old laptop was still in the house. I found it in the closet of what used to be her sewing room, buried under boxes of fabric and forgotten photo albums. The password was the same as it had always been: my birthday. I didn't know what I was looking for. Maybe just something that would help me understand how the woman I remembered, gentle, accommodating, always deferring to my father, had secretly maneuvered to protect me from beyond the grave. Her email inbox was mostly spam and expired newsletters, but in the sent folder, I found a conversation from 2018, 1 year before she died. To M. Thornton at thorntonlaw.com. Subject: Concerns. Maggie. I need you to ensure Sarah is protected no matter what happens. I've watched Gavin become someone I don't recognize. The gambling is worse than I told you. The lies are constant. He's involved in things I don't understand, but I know they're dangerous. If anything happens to me, make sure she gets the trust documents. Make sure she knows the house is hers. Gavin will try to take it. I'm certain of that now. She deserves better than what I gave her. I was too afraid to fight while I was alive, but I won't let him hurt her when I'm gone. Eleanor. I read my mother's words through tears. I didn't know I was crying. Then I opened a browser and searched for the SEC investigation I'd heard about on the radio. Boston Financial Times. SEC expands probe into alleged market manipulation at multiple VC firms. One name appeared in the article's second paragraph. A company called Meridian Capital, allegedly the victim of a coordinated short-selling scheme that had cost them $2.3 million in 2019. The vanity plate outside flashed through my mind. MRDN Cap, Meridian Capital. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. A woman's voice. Ms. Chandler? My name is Eleanor Vance. I'm the CEO of Meridian Capital. We need to talk about your father. We met the next morning at a cafe in Provincetown, 40 minutes from the house. I told my father I was going for a drive to clear my head. He seemed pleased by my apparent submission. Eleanor Vance was not what I expected. 55 years old, silver-haired, with the bearing of someone who had survived wars both corporate and personal. She ordered black coffee and got straight to the point. Your father destroyed my company's stock price in 2019. He spread false information through back channels, then shorted our shares before the crash. He made $2.3 million in 3 days. We nearly went bankrupt. How do you know it was him? She slid a folder across the table. Because the SEC has been investigating him for 2 years. I've been cooperating with the federal prosecutor's office. They have emails, trading records, witness testimony. Your father made a lot of enemies, Sarah, and he made a lot of mistakes. I opened the folder. Inside were photocopies of documents I didn't fully understand. Trading logs, wire transfers, internal communications. But one page stopped me cold. A casino marker. $890,000, signed by Gavin Chandler, dated 3 months ago. He's in debt to an illegal gambling operation, Eleanor continued. Nearly $1 million. The $1.2 million he's trying to get from your house? That's to pay off his bookies and reinvest in another scheme. He's drowning, and he's planning to drag you down with him. I stared at the marker. My father's signature. His handwriting. His desperation made tangible. Why are you telling me this? Because the prosecutor needs an inside witness, someone who can confirm the timeline, someone who can get your father to reveal himself in front of people he can't deny. She leaned forward. And because I want justice. He took 18 months of my life rebuilding what he destroyed. I want him to answer for it. I thought about the slap. David's silence. 12 years of believing I had no power. What exactly? I said slowly. Do you need me to do? Eleanor smiled. Have you ever heard of a controlled demolition? I returned to the house wearing the mask of a defeated daughter. I'm still thinking, I told my father when he demanded an answer. Give me until Friday. I want to make sure I understand everything before I sign. Friday was March 21st. He accepted the deadline with poorly concealed impatience. What followed was the longest week of my life. Every day, my father and David applied pressure in different ways. Gavin used guilt. Your mother would be ashamed of how you're tearing this family apart. David used fear. If Dad goes under, we all go under. Is that what you want? On Wednesday, I discovered my father had called my firm. He'd spoken to the HR director, casually mentioning that I was experiencing family difficulties and might need extended leave. When I confronted him, he smiled. I'm looking out for your interests, Sarah. You've been stressed. People are starting to notice. On Thursday, Victor Harrington called me. Victor was one of my father's oldest business partners, a white-haired man with old money manners who had known me since I was 6 years old. Sarah, dear, I'm just calling to check in. Your father mentioned you've been resistant to some family decisions. I hope you know that cooperation is always the wisest path. Families that fight in public rarely recover. The subtext was clear: sign the papers or your reputation won't survive. That night, I received an email from Preston Hayes, Assistant United States Attorney, District of Massachusetts. Ms. Chandler. Ms. Vance has briefed me on your willingness to cooperate. I'd like to arrange a meeting at your earliest convenience. We have audio recordings from your father's communications with his gambling contacts. These recordings are damaging, but not conclusive on their own. We believe a controlled environment, where your father reveals his intentions in front of witnesses, would be invaluable. Are you prepared to proceed? I typed my response without hesitation. I'm ready. Tell me what you need. The reply came within minutes. We'll need a guest list, somewhere your father feels in control, and an occasion he can't refuse. I met Preston Hayes in person at the Federal Building in Boston. He was younger than I expected, late 40s, with close-cropped gray hair and the steady gaze of someone who had spent his career separating lies from truth. We have enough to prosecute, he said, sliding a file across his desk. Securities fraud, market manipulation, money laundering through the gambling debts. Your father is looking at 15 to 20 years. Then why do you need me? Because a conviction is stronger with witnesses, and because your father has spent 30 years building a reputation. Juries like seeing the mask come off in real time. He leaned back. You mentioned he wants you to sign over the house. If he believes you're going to cooperate, he'll let his guard down. If the right people are watching when he does. The plan took shape over the next 3 hours. A dinner at the Cape Cod House, positioned as a family reconciliation before I signed the documents. My father would invite his business partners, the people whose respect he craved, and I would invite some guests of my own. The guest list I proposed: Preston Hayes, introduced as a federal construction client I was courting for a project; Eleanor Vance, introduced as an investor interested in family real estate; Maggie Thornton, the family lawyer whose presence would seem natural; Victor Harrington and 2 other partners of my father's; Raymond Wells, the broker, who would panic beautifully when he realized what was happening. 11 people. March 28th, 7:00 p.m. I called my father that evening. Dad, I've made my decision. I'll sign the papers, but I want to do it properly. A family dinner like Mom used to host. We can invite your partners, make it a celebration, show everyone that the Chandlers are united. The relief in his voice was palpable. That's my girl. Finally, you're acting like a Chandler. David called me an hour later. I knew you'd come around. You just needed to understand your place. I smiled at the phone. Yes, David. I understand perfectly now. David suspected something. I could see it in the way he watched me over the following days. The narrowed eyes, the casual questions that weren't casual at all. Who was that you were talking to on the phone? Why did you drive to Provincetown? Since when do you have federal clients? 3 days before the dinner, I came back from a walk to find my bedroom door slightly ajar. My suitcase had been moved. The envelope from Thornton and Associates was in a different position than where I'd left it. That night, David pulled our father aside. I watched from the hallway, hidden by shadows. "Something's off, Dad. She's too calm. She went from refusing to sign to planning a dinner party? It doesn't add up." My father waved him off. "She's always been dramatic. Now she wants attention before she gives in. Let her have her little moment. After she signs, things go back to normal." I looked through her things. There's legal paperwork I don't understand, something about a trust. "That's old news. The lawyers are handling it. Don't concern yourself with what you don't understand, David." David's jaw tightened, but he didn't argue. He never argued with our father. The next morning, I found him waiting for me in the kitchen. "I don't know what you're planning," he said, his voice low. "But if you embarrass this family, if you do anything to hurt Dad's reputation, I will make your life hell." I poured myself coffee without looking at him. "You know what I find interesting, David? You've never once asked if I'm okay, after what happened." I touched my cheek, still faintly tender. "You just want to make sure I stay in line." His face hardened. "The house you think you're protecting, it's not yours." I took a sip of coffee. "You should read Mom's will more carefully." I walked away before he could respond. My story is reaching its turning point, and I know some of you watching have felt this too. The moment when you realize the people who should protect you are the ones causing the most damage. If you've ever had to choose yourself over someone else's approval, let me know in the comments. And if you want to see what happened when my father sat down at his own table and discovered who I really invited, hit that like button and keep watching. The night before the dinner, I sat alone in my mother's old room. Her presence was everywhere. In the lavender sachet still tucked in the dresser drawer, in the reading glasses folded on the nightstand, in the framed photograph of us from my college graduation. She had been so proud that day. I remember her squeezing my hand and whispering, "You're going to build things that last, Sarah. I know it." I didn't know then that she was already planning her own construction project, a structure designed to protect me long after she was gone. I spread the documents across her bed, the trust deed, now creased from how many times I'd read it, the email printouts from Preston, the guest confirmations, Eleanor Vance, Maggie Thornton, everyone in position. I allowed myself one moment of doubt. Tomorrow, I would lose my father. Not to death, but to something perhaps more final. I would lose my brother, though I wondered now if I'd ever really had him. I would tear down the illusion of family I'd been clinging to for 34 years. Was it worth it? I looked at the photograph again, my mother's smile, the way her hand rested on my shoulder, the words she'd written in that email. "She deserves better than what I gave her." I took out a sheet of paper and wrote a letter to no one. "I am not doing this for revenge. I am doing this because I deserve to stop pretending, because my mother gave me the tools to fight back, and I owe it to her to use them. Because the foundation of this family was cracked long before I was born, and it's time to stop building on broken ground." I folded the letter and slipped it into my pocket. Tomorrow. A knock at the door. Maggie Thornton, arriving a day early as planned. "Sarah, we need to talk. Your father just hired a lawyer to challenge the trust. We have less time than we thought." March 28th, 7:00 p.m. The Cape Cod house had never looked more beautiful or more like a stage set for a tragedy. I'd spent the afternoon transforming the dining room. The long mahogany table gleamed under the antique chandelier, the same one my mother had chosen when I was 8 years old. White tapered candles, crystal stemware, arrangements of white lilies in silver vases, their funeral sweet scent filling the air. 11 place settings, 11 witnesses. The guests arrived in waves. First, Victor Harrington and his wife, Margaret. Behind them came Theodore Nash, another of my father's investment partners, with his signature bow tie and barely concealed disdain for anything that wasn't making him money. Raymond Wells appeared next, the broker, his eyes darting nervously around the room as if he sensed something wrong but couldn't identify it. Then Eleanor Vance, in a charcoal dress that cost more than my car, introducing herself as an investor interested in family properties. My father shook her hand with the oily charm he reserved for wealthy strangers. Maggie Thornton arrived with a leather briefcase, perfectly playing her role as the family attorney here to finalize the paperwork. And finally, Preston Hayes, tall, composed, his federal badge hidden beneath a tailored blazer. I introduced him as a major client from a government construction project I'm courting. My father beamed. The room was full of the people he most wanted to impress. His daughter was about to sign away her inheritance. All was right in Gavin Chandler's world. David leaned close to me as I poured wine. I don't recognize half these people. What are you doing? Making sure everyone who matters is here to witness, I said. Witness what? I smiled and walked away. Under my napkin, folded precisely, was the trust deed. 12 pages. Notarized. Irrefutable. My father raised his glass. To family, he said, and to Sarah, who has finally learned the value of loyalty. I raised my glass but didn't drink. The main course hadn't even been served yet. I waited until the appetizer plates had been cleared and the beef Wellington sat steaming on the sideboard. The conversation had turned to investments, as it always did when my father had an audience. He was holding court at the head of the table, gesturing expansively, playing the role of patriarch and power broker. I stood. The room fell silent. Before we continue, I said, my voice steady, I'd like to address the reason we're all here tonight. My father smiled indulgently. Of course, dear. You wanted to make an announcement before signing the papers, didn't you? Something about appreciating family? Not exactly. I reached under my napkin and withdrew the trust deed. I wanted everyone here to understand the truth about this house, and about the documents my father has been pressuring me to sign. David half rose from his chair. Sarah, what the hell are you? Sit down, David. Something in my voice made him comply. I held up the document so everyone could see the notary seal. This is the irrevocable trust established by my mother, Eleanor Chandler, in 2012. According to this trust, I am the sole trustee of the Cape Cod property. Not my father, not my brother, me. Victor Harrington frowned. Gavin, what is she talking about? My father's smile faltered. Sarah, this isn't the time. Mrs. Thornton, I turned to Maggie. You drafted this document. Would you please confirm its contents for the table? Maggie stood, her voice clear and professional. I prepared the trust at Mrs. Eleanor Chandler's request. The language is unambiguous. Sarah Chandler has sole authority over all trust assets. No modifications can be made without her written consent. Mr. Gavin Chandler has no ownership interest in this property and no authority to mortgage, sell, or transfer it. The silence that followed was absolute. Raymond Wells's face had gone white. He pushed back from the table slightly, as if preparing to run. My father's jaw tightened. This is a misunderstanding. Those documents were supposed to be... Supposed to be what, Dad? I asked. Hidden from me, like everything else? And now, I said, turning to Preston Hayes, I'd like to properly introduce one of our guests. Mr. Hayes, would you tell everyone who you really are? Preston rose from his seat, reaching into his jacket pocket. When his hand emerged, it held a leather case that he flipped open to reveal a gold badge. Gavin Chandler, my name is Preston Hayes. I'm an assistant United States attorney with the District of Massachusetts. I have a warrant for your arrest on charges of securities fraud, market manipulation, and money laundering. For a moment, no one moved. Then chaos. David lunged toward the door and froze when he saw the 2 FBI agents who had been waiting in the hallway, summoned by a text I'd sent 3 minutes earlier. Raymond Wells knocked over his wineglass, the red spreading across the white tablecloth like blood. I didn't know anything, he stammered. Whatever he told you, I was just facilitating paperwork. I had no idea. Victor Harrington stared at my father with the expression of a man watching his investments evaporate. Gavin, tell me this is a mistake. But my father was looking at me, only at me. You did this, he said. His voice was quiet now, controlled, more frightening than his anger. My own daughter. You slapped me for asking questions, Dad. You tried to steal from me. You've been lying to me for 12 years about who owns this house. Eleanor Vance spoke for the first time since the appetizer course. And he's been lying to everyone else for much longer. Gavin, in 2019, you manipulated my company's stock and made $2.3 million while nearly destroying everything I built. Did you think no one would ever find out? Preston approached with handcuffs. Gavin Chandler, you have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. My father didn't resist as the cuffs clicked around his wrists, but his eyes never left mine. Your mother would be ashamed of you, he said. No, I replied quietly. She's the one who gave me the weapons to fight back. She knew exactly who you were. They led him out through the front door of the house he thought he owned, past the guests he'd hoped to impress, into the waiting federal vehicle. He didn't look back. After the federal agents escorted my father out, David remained. He stood against the wall near the doorway, arms crossed, face pale but defiant. The other guests had scattered, Victor Harrington murmuring about reassessing partnerships, Raymond Wells practically sprinting to his Mercedes, Theodore Nash shaking his head as he called his own lawyer, but David stayed. You're insane, he said. You've destroyed this family over what? Some old paperwork? A slap? I walked toward him slowly. David, do you know what Mom wrote in her trust? Not just about the house. I don't care what she... Section 7B. I pulled out my phone, where I'd photographed the relevant page. Any beneficiary who participates in, witnesses without intervention, or verbally supports physical abuse against the trustee shall be permanently removed from all beneficiary designations. Maggie Thornton stepped forward. That provision is legally enforceable. On March 14th, you witnessed your father strike your sister and subsequently blamed her for the incident. I have a signed statement from Sarah and corroborating evidence from her medical records. Medical records? David's voice cracked. The bruising was documented when I visited an urgent care in Provincetown, I said. I told them I fell, but the photos don't lie and neither do the timestamps. David's face cycled through shock, anger, and finally, something that might have been fear. Sarah, you can't. We're family. Were. I held his gaze. You had a choice that morning, David. You could have said something. Anything. Instead, you told me it was my fault. You chose your side. So what happens now? Now you have 48 hours to collect your personal belongings from this property. After that, if you enter without my permission, you'll be arrested for trespassing. He stared at me as if seeing me for the first time. You're not the sister I knew. No, I agreed. I'm better. The fallout was swift and measurable. 3 days after the dinner, my father's arraignment made the Boston Financial Times. Former VC partner arrested at family dinner. Daughter orchestrates takedown. The article detailed the charges: 3 counts of securities fraud, 2 counts of market manipulation, 1 count of money laundering. Combined maximum sentence, 15 to 20 years. Bail was denied. The judge cited flight risk. My father had accounts in the Cayman Islands that the prosecutors discovered during their investigation. He would wait for trial in federal custody. David's implosion happened in slow motion. Within the first week, 3 of his largest commercial real estate clients terminated their contracts. We can't afford the association, one of them told him, according to the voicemail David left me in a rage. Your family is toxic. He lost the Back Bay condo, the one my father had bought him. Without Gavin's money propping him up, he couldn't afford the maintenance fees. By April, he was renting a studio apartment in Quincy. Raymond Wells surrendered his broker's license before the SEC could take it from him. The investigation into his role was still ongoing, but his career was effectively over. And Eleanor Vance sent me flowers. The card read, "Justice delayed is still justice. Thank you for your courage." I kept the card in my mother's jewelry box, where I'd started storing the things that mattered. The strangest part was the silence. For the first time in my adult life, no one in my family was calling me with demands, guilt trips, or obligations. The phone didn't ring with David's accusations or my father's commands. I sat on the deck of the Cape Cod house, watching the ocean, and realized I didn't know what to do with peace. It had been so long since I'd experienced it that the quiet felt almost threatening. My phone buzzed. A text from Eleanor Vance. "When you're ready, I'd like to discuss something. Dinner next week?" I typed back, "I'm ready now." The first night I spent alone in the Cape Cod house, I cried for 3 hours. Not because I regretted what I'd done, because I was mourning what I'd lost, or rather, what I'd finally admitted was never really mine. I had wanted so badly for my family to be something it wasn't, for my father to be proud of me, for my brother to protect me, for the Chandler name to mean something beyond money and manipulation. At 3 a.m., I called Olivia Harper, my closest friend from MIT, the person who had listened to my family complaints for 15 years without ever telling me what I already knew. "I don't understand how I feel," I said. "I should be relieved, or triumphant, or something, but I just feel empty." "Sarah," Olivia's voice was gentle, "you didn't just expose your father. You buried the version of him you'd been hoping existed. That's not emptiness, that's grief." "But I did the right thing." "Absolutely, and doing the right thing can still break your heart." We talked until sunrise. About the mother I'd lost twice, once to cancer, once to the realization of how much she'd been hiding from me. About the brother I'd never really had. About the father I'd been trying to earn love from for 34 years. The next morning, I found a letter in my mother's nightstand. Maggie Thornton had left it there the night before the dinner, as she'd been instructed to do when the time was right. "My dearest Sarah, if you're reading this, it means you found your strength. I'm sorry I wasn't brave enough to fight while I was alive, but I knew you would be. You were always the builder in this family, the one who understood that foundations matter. I am so proud of you. Mom." I pressed the letter to my chest and let myself cry again. But this time, the tears felt different. They felt like permission. I know many of you watching have experienced the same kind of loss, not from death, but from realizing that the people who were supposed to love you never really could. If my story has touched you, please share this video with someone who needs to hear it. And don't forget to subscribe for the final part of my journey. The best is still to come. 2 weeks after the dinner, David requested a meeting. I agreed, against my better judgment. We met at a coffee shop in neutral territory, a place in the Back Bay where neither of us had memories. He looked diminished. The expensive watch was gone. The confident posture had collapsed. He ordered black coffee and stared at the table for a full minute before speaking. "I came to apologize." I said nothing. I waited. I didn't realize how serious things were. I was just following Dad's lead. "I thought you were being dramatic, like always. I didn't know about the gambling debts. I didn't know about the trust." "You knew he hit me." David flinched. "I should have said something." "But you didn't." "I was scared of him too, Sarah. I know that's not an excuse, but—" "You're right." I set my coffee cup down. "It's not an excuse, and that's not actually an apology." "What?" "An apology takes responsibility. You just told me why you made choices. You didn't say you were wrong. You didn't say you'd do anything differently. You just explained why I should understand." I stood. "That's not the same thing, David." His face hardened. "So that's it? You're just cutting me off? Forever?" "I'm setting a boundary. If you want a relationship with me, a real one, not the one where I do what you want and you ignore what I need. Then you need to actually change, not just apologize for getting caught. I gathered my things. You can contact me through my lawyer if there are legal matters. Otherwise, I don't think we have anything else to discuss. This is insane. You're throwing away family over. Family is a choice, David. One you stopped making a long time ago. As I left, I caught him taking out his phone, angling it toward me. Recording, probably planning to post something on social media about his unreasonable sister. Same David, same instincts. I smiled to myself and kept walking. The preliminary hearing took place in May, 2 months after the dinner. I was subpoenaed as a witness, though Preston Hayes assured me my testimony wouldn't be the centerpiece of the prosecution's case. They had the financial records, the trading logs, the recorded calls with the gambling operation. My role was simply to establish the timeline and confirm my father's state of mind. The federal courthouse in Boston was a study in institutional gravity: marble floors, wood-paneled walls, American flags flanking the judge's bench. I sat in the gallery next to Eleanor Vance, watching the proceedings with the detachment of an observer rather than a participant. My father entered in an orange jumpsuit. No tailored suit, no Harvard cufflinks. His hands were shackled in front of him, his posture somehow diminished despite his efforts to stand tall. He saw me in the gallery. Our eyes met. I expected to feel something: anger, satisfaction, perhaps even pity. Instead, I felt what I imagined a structural engineer feels when watching a condemned building finally come down. Not pleasure exactly, just the completion of an inevitable process. The prosecutor presented evidence for an hour: trading records from 2019, wire transfers to offshore accounts, the audio recording of my father negotiating with his bookmaker, his voice unmistakably desperate. I need more time. The money's coming. I have a property I can leverage. When the recording mentioned the Cape Cod house, several members of the gallery murmured. The judge ruled there was sufficient evidence to proceed to trial. Bail was denied for the second time. As the marshals led my father out, he passed within 5 feet of my seat. He paused, just for a moment. "Sarah." His voice was hoarse. "I'm still your father." "Yes," I said quietly, "and I'm still the daughter you never saw clearly." He opened his mouth to respond, but the marshals urged him forward. That was the last time I saw Gavin Chandler as a free man. The call from Victor Harrington came in early June. I hadn't expected to hear from him again. He'd been one of my father's closest allies, and I'd assumed the dinner had permanently poisoned any potential relationship between us. But his voice on the phone was different now, respectful, almost cautious. "Sarah, I want to be direct with you. I was appalled by what happened that night. Not just at your father, but at myself. I spent 30 years trusting a man who was lying to everyone around him. Why are you calling me, Victor? Because I need an engineer I can trust, someone with integrity. My development group is starting a hospital project in Rhode Island. $120 million. And I'd like you to be the lead structural engineer." I was silent for a long moment. "You're offering me the biggest project of my career because my father turned out to be a criminal?" "I'm offering it because of how you handled yourself. Anyone can be born into a successful family. It takes actual character to hold that family accountable when they cross the line." He paused. "I've worked with a lot of engineers, Sarah. I've never seen one stay that calm under that kind of pressure." I accepted the project. Not because of what it meant for my career, though it meant everything, but because it felt like the universe was finally responding to the question I'd been asking my whole life. What am I worth when no one is propping me up? The answer, it turned out, was more than I knew. That same week, Eleanor Vance made a different kind of offer. "I want to fund a foundation," she said over dinner, "for women escaping financial abuse. I want you to run it." I didn't hesitate. "When do we start?" 6 months later, the Cape Cod house finally felt like home. I'd renovated cautiously, keeping the bones my mother had loved while adding new spaces that reflected the life I was building. The sewing room became my office. The guest bedroom was converted into a small library. On the deck, I installed a telescope my mother had always wanted but never bought. The Haven Foundation launched in October. Seed funding, $500,000, drawn from the restitution payments the court ordered my father to make to his victims. Eleanor Vance had requested that a portion be directed to the foundation, and the judge agreed. Our first client was a woman named Michelle, 42 years old, 3 children, married to a man who had drained her retirement accounts and hidden assets in shell companies. Within 6 weeks, we'd connected her with forensic accountants, family law attorneys, and a safe place to rebuild. I didn't know places like this existed, she told me at our second meeting. I thought I was trapped. I know the feeling, I said. I was too, until someone showed me the door. The hospital project in Rhode Island broke ground in November. I stood on site as the first beams were lowered into place, watching the skeleton of something permanent take shape against the winter sky. David had stopped calling. I heard through mutual acquaintances that he was struggling. His real estate business had collapsed. His reputation never recovered. Part of me wondered if he ever thought about that morning, if he ever regretted not speaking up. But most of me had moved on. The family I had now wasn't defined by blood. It was defined by the people who showed up. Olivia, Eleanor, Maggie, the women we helped through Haven. We weren't related, but we were family. On the anniversary of my mother's death, I sat on the deck and wrote her a letter. The ocean stretched out before me, gray and endless under the November sky. I could hear the wind through the dune grass, the same sound that had lulled me to sleep every summer of my childhood. Mom, I did what you asked me to do. I protected the house. I protected myself. And I built something from the ruins, not just a career or a foundation, but a life that actually belongs to me. I still don't know if you'd be proud or heartbroken. Maybe both. I think you'd understand that sometimes those two things aren't opposites. I've stopped waiting for Dad to change. I've stopped hoping David will wake up. I've stopped believing that family is something you're owed just because you share DNA. You taught me that the foundation matters most, that the things we build are only as strong as what we lay beneath them. I'm building on solid ground now. I love you. I wish you were here to see it. Sarah. I folded the letter, carried it to the fire pit, and set it alight. The flames curled the paper's edges, turning my words into ash and smoke. The wind lifted the ashes toward the ocean. I watched them scatter until there was nothing left, and for the first time since all of this began, I felt something other than grief or anger or determination. I felt peace. Morning, early December. The sun was just breaking over the Atlantic, painting the Cape Cod house in shades of gold and rose. I stood in the doorway, coffee in hand, wearing the new coat I'd bought myself for no reason other than that I wanted it. The updated trust document sat on the kitchen table next to the Haven Foundation's first annual report. On the wall, in a new frame, was my mother's photograph. The one from my graduation, her hand on my shoulder, her smile full of something I hadn't recognized until now. Pride. The drive to Rhode Island would take 2 hours. The hospital project team was meeting at 9. My phone showed 3 emails from potential Haven clients, 2 from colleagues, and 1 from Eleanor Vance with a subject line that read, "Dinner next week?" I smiled. Not a triumphant smile, not a victorious one. Just the smile of someone who had finally stopped surviving and started building. I am Sarah Chandler. I am a structural engineer. My job is to build things that withstand storms. And I finally learned to apply that to myself. Thank you for staying with me through this entire journey. If you've ever had to set boundaries with family, if you've ever had to choose yourself over their expectations, you're not alone. Drop a comment and tell me your story. And if you want to hear more about justice, healing, and finding your own strength, check out the videos in the description below. I'll see you in the next story.